Hello and welcome to another episode of He Says, She Says Film Reviews. I'm Dave G.
And I'm Lee G.
And tonight we're looking at a documentary on COVID. No, we're not. We're actually looking at a movie called Songbird that could very well turn into a documentary with the way things are going at the moment. This is actually a kind of strange movie because it looks at a pandemic which is actually called COVID, but it's not COVID-19. That sweeps around the world in 2024. Basically, this movie is what happens when Michael Bay gets bored. Michael Bay is a producer on this film working with director Adam Mason. And like I said, it tells a story about what happens when a pandemic sweeps around the world in 2024. It centers kind of around three major stories. The first story centers around a character called Nico, played by KJ Apa. And he's a delivery kind of guy, but he is one of these people who are immune to the virus that's spreading around the world. So he has a lot of freedom with his life. And I should point out that things do get a bit extreme in this film to the point where people who actually have the virus are taken to these containment camps where, as one of the characters says, you know they're going to die. Now, Nico has fallen in love with Sarah, played by Sophia Carson. She's not immune, so therefore she's trapped inside her house and can never leave. And Nico wants to try and find a way to get her out. Now, Nico works for Lester, played by Craig Robinson, and this is where the first link comes in between the two stories, because one of the clients that Lester has for his company is a husband and wife team, William, played by Bradley Whitford, and also Piper, played by Demi Moore. They're running illegal immunity bracelets. If you've got enough money, you can buy one of the bracelets. The third story that comes about here is a young singer, May, played by Alexander Daddario. She travelled to LA thinking that she was going to have a successful career as a singer. Then COVID hit. She now finds herself trapped in a hotel room, singing to people online, where she meets a former soldier, Dozer, played by Paul Walter Hauser, who we just talked about in Cruella as well. And they start kind of a small relationship, talking to each other back and forth. And Dozer is an interesting character because he's one of the very few people who actually likes being trapped indoors because he's suffering from post-traumatic stress from his time in Afghanistan and Iraq. Now, if you pitched this movie 10 years ago, people would have said that you were absolutely crazy. A film where LA has been brought to its knees by a pandemic with people being trapped inside. You would have thought that this was an absolute crazy film that should be in sci-fi fantasy. Nowadays, this film is so realistic that it's actually listed as a drama alongside a thriller rather than sci-fi. So what was your take on Songbird? Because I know a lot of people out there think this is an absolutely crazy film that is almost too perfectly summing up what's happening in the world at the moment.
Yeah, I think you can't watch it and not think of the current COVID situation across the world. I know even within Australia, different states and territories have had different experiences, and we live in Victoria and have had, I suppose, the most harsh restrictions within Australia, where we've had a number of lockdowns and tight restrictions that other states haven't had the same depth of, or the same lengths of, that's for sure. And so when you're watching this and you're seeing news of all over the world, we know places like Greece and Thailand have had some strict lockdowns as well. It's almost when you're watching this film, it's what it could get to if things don't become contained and the virus continues to a point where you are completely cut off from your loved ones, and don't have travel zones. We've been locked down to 5K limits where you can't go 5Ks from your house and you can only go to the shops, and you can only, at times even one person from the household can only go there. And I know other friends from interstate haven't even understood that Victoria's gone through that and have been shocked when we've explained that. obviously this movie is even more intense than that. And, you know, the thought of a loved one being dragged away out of your home to a camp situation where that's where they're going to die, you know, is a terrible thing. But your mind keeps going back to, well, that's where we could get to.
Yeah.
If things continue the way they are. So yeah, I would have said, you know, previously watching a movie like this, it would be kind of like Outbreak.
Yeah.
You watch it and you think, that would never happen here. It's an intriguing storyline. And yeah, but now you can't not relate it to current day life. Does that make sense?
And I guess it's even more realistic for people in America watching this film because, like, there's lots of scenes in here of cars on fire and buildings on fire, which a lot of people in America went through last year with the political uprising as well during COVID. So I don't know how true it is, but I read a little bit before, a little bit of trivia, that apparently some of the sequences where there was buildings burning and stuff like that were actually filmed during the political uprising. Because I think we do have to talk about the fact that this was one of the first movies filmed in America during the COVID outbreak. Well, I was just reading before that there was a do not work order placed on the filmmakers when they were making this film because they were actually filming it during the strictest COVID regulations. And as a result, when you watch this movie, most scenes only have 2 actors in them at a time, or you'll have an actor outside and an actor inside with the way that they were filming it. And to me, that was what really made me love this movie, was that these filmmakers made this movie during a time when not only they shouldn't have been doing it, but during a time that would have been incredibly hard to have filmed a film. I'm imagining that because of the fact that they weren't supposed to be filming, a lot of it would have been done with handheld cameras so that it wasn't obvious that they were shooting a film. You have KJ Apa, who possibly was under threat of arrest at times because he was zipping his bike around filming scenes when he probably really shouldn't have been outside. So to me, that's an amazing feat of filmmaking, and I think when you look at it, you think, yeah, trust Michael Bay to push the boundaries, because he's been pushing the boundaries of filmmaking for a lot of years now. So, but it was interesting because normally when you think of a Michael Bay movie, you think of an epic big blockbuster with lots of explosions and stuff like that. And for him to be involved with a movie like this with Adam Mason, where there's almost a more realistic feel to it, even though it's supposed to be post-apocalyptic, it's unusual for Michael Bay, but for me it worked. Did that work for you? There was a realism with this film that...
Yeah, there was a realism, and as I said, you couldn't not watch it and not think of our current situation. So yeah, there were 2 writers, Adam Mason and Simon Boyes, you know, with of course Michael Bay having input, I'm sure. And I think for what they achieved, I think at this time it's very easy to have a judgment on how good a movie is or isn't, but you've got to take into the equation the complexities of how they're filming at the moment, and you know, with restrictions in place and what they've really achieved within restrictions and limits and the time we're living in. So I think when you think about all that, they've done a brilliant job, because to get the quality that they got, I'm sure that they could look at it and think, you know, we could have done better here or there. But also with the limits they're under, they've produced something amazing, especially for our time. And I'm not saying it wasn't great anyway. It is good, but I think it's more exceptional when you think of the pressure everyone's under at the moment. And, you know, there's a real yearning to be watching new movies and to still have new movies coming out when many productions have been on hold. And so for actors and directors and writers to be working in the background and to produce something like this. They've created something amazing at this point in time.
We've seen some amazing feats, I think, of filmmaking during this time. There was Malcolm and Marie, which was a two-hander movie about a couple going through a domestic breakdown that was filmed inside one house for the whole film. We've just seen, and I know a lot of people out there probably missed it because it kind of came out during our lockdown here in Melbourne and only got shown for a couple of weeks, but there was Locked Down, the heist movie from Britain with Anne Hathaway. That was the same, where most of the movie was filmed with just the two of them because it was the only way that they were able to film it. But I loved both of those films, but I really think that Songbird went to the next level. Like, those two movies kind of tried to keep a majority of the movie being filmed inside, whereas Songbird kind of almost went for that action sequences where you had KJ Apa driving through the streets on motorbikes and things like that. What did you think of the three storylines and how they all tied together as well? Because I thought that was brave, considering that they had to try and make this movie with only two actors around each other at a time as well.
No, it really worked, and as it came to light, through the movie, how they intertwined, that revelation kind of worked well as well, because right at the start you're not quite sure that they do intertwine or how they intertwine, but it all pulled together really well, and I think KJ Apa does an extraordinary job. Sophia Carson, she also did a brilliant job with her character.
She's got some harrowing scenes in this film.
She does. She has some real challenges, and probably some of the biggest challenges of all the characters in the movie, and some heartbreaking scenes for her as well. And, characters are isolated, as you can imagine, in the pandemic, and then the complexity of not knowing what to do, and at times the challenge between what is right and what is wrong, and what choice do you make, and do you step out and do something that might be seen as illegal but at the same time is survival, and also from other characters saving someone you love as well. Yeah. So, that all intertwines, and
it's an amazing love story between Nico and Sarah, because you realise very early on in this movie that they've never actually touched, because the relationships happened during the lockdown and has happened through a door, basically. So, yeah.
And you've got some characters there that are more behind-the-scenes techie kind of guys. And again, you can see sometimes challenges of right versus wrong, legal versus illegal. Which character are they going to choose to help, because there's consequences of helping or not or consequences of not helping someone, whether it's life or death, or, for someone else, or a danger for themselves if they help. So, so there's some good characterization there. Bradley Whitford does a great job in the movie, as well as Demi Moore. I think it's a great cast, actually. And they all do really well together, as well as Alexandra.
I was really surprised with Craig Robinson, who played Lester in this film. He's one of those characters, he's almost like so many of the characters in Star Wars, where you never know whether he's going to go to the good side or the bad side, because he's all about himself, and you get the feeling that he's going to take what opportunity he can for himself. But Craig Robinson normally plays comedic roles, so to kind of see him in this role where... when you study filmmaking, they call him a hand of God character, where he basically is pulling all the strings and can go either way. It's interesting to see him play that role. But I thought Demi Moore was really good in this role. She's one of those actresses that kind of disappears for a while and then suddenly reappears, and I thought she was really good in this. But my standout in this film was KJ Apa. Been really impressed with him outside of Riverdale. When you put films like this alongside The Hate You Give, he's really starting to build a really, really good body of work outside Riverdale, which to me says that he's going to have a future once Riverdale, not that we want it to happen, ends. So yeah, I was really impressed by that, and he carries a lot of this film as well. So yeah, I thought he did an absolutely amazing job. I thought Alexandra Daddario was actually kind of underused a little bit, like for someone of her caliber. But yeah, she does play a very important part in the film as well, and I think she also has some great scenes with Paul Walter Hauser. I'm becoming a real Paul Walter Hauser fan. I loved his performance that he did in Clint Eastwood's film a couple of years ago, where I think he got an Oscar nomination for it, but he's one of those actors that for years and years just had small roles in films, and then yeah, he worked with Clint Eastwood and suddenly he made a name for himself with that film, and now he's popping up everywhere. But he's one of those actors that every character I see him play, I think I end up liking the character that he's playing. So yeah, like I love Dozer in this. That whole thing that that for him the lockdown is a blessing because he doesn't have to go out into society anymore. And then yeah, he's faced with how does he save somebody that he has fallen in love with when he's too frightened to leave the house. So yeah, it's an amazing storyline, and I think this movie is a big step up. When you look through the career of the director, he has made a lot of B-grade films over the years, and I think this is a real big step up. And yeah, I think this movie deserves a lot more credit than it's been getting. So what are you going to give Songbird out of 5?
I'm going to give it 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little step higher. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. I really liked this. I think knowing the pressure that the filmmakers were under to make this movie, I mean, getting a do not work order, that just hasn't happened in cinema for such a long time. I mean, when you look through the history of cinema, do not work orders, unless you're running an unsafe film shoot, which is rare these days, those kinds of things only really got handed out when America was worried about communism in the 60s and things like that. So to push through that and to come out with a movie that is not only watchable, but to me, it's the next step in filmmaking. And I think they did an absolutely fantastic job. So 4 out of 5 from me, and 3.5 out of 5 from you.
Yes. And
that's it for this episode. Go out and check out Songbird. I've just had a look online now. It is still showing in some cinemas. It did get an interrupted season because of the lockdown. It's on in some cinemas, and if you can't get to a cinema to see it, it is on Amazon Prime. So check it out on Amazon Prime if you can't get out to a cinema. But that's it for this episode of He Says, She Says Film Reviews. I've been Dave G.
And I'm Lee G.
And we'll be back soon with another episode.